Greetings and welcome to another edition of Crossroads, an oral history effort of the Samuel L. Smith Educational Foundation and the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation of Nevada. I'm your host, Al Gourrier, and on our panel today are the Jazz Brothers. Thanks to those of you who have joined us on previous sessions. Actually, this will be the third installment in our Jazz Brothers series. The first two series featured Brother Michael, Mr. Jazz Gourrier. And we talked about our humble beginnings at 1023 Lion Street in the 13th Ward in Uptown New Orleans and our significant involvement in jazz. And just to kind of put pull a few dots together, I'd like to just share a little history about how we came to call ourselves Jazz Brothers. So those of you who are familiar with the history of jazz, it was an idiom that emerged out of Congo Square in New Orleans, Louisiana, which was the only place in the New World where African slaves could freely sing their music and dance their dances. And this song and dance and presentation and retention of music took place primarily on Sundays, which was the day off for slaves in the New Orleans area, primarily because of the Catholic tradition and the roots of Catholicism in New Orleans that permeate everything. And as a matter of fact, if you say you're from New Orleans, you're probably a Catholic. Well, the slaves were able to sing and dance on Sundays. And from the hollow ground of Congo Square emerged the only true presentational jazz form, which is the only true presentation form of art that this country has given to the world, and that is jazz. And it actually began, as I indicated, in Congo Square and emerged over a period of time. But probably one of the really significant contributors to the music was a young man by the name of John Robichaux. John Robichaux was a young man who was born in Thibodaux, Louisiana in 1866. And as a youngster, he studied music, and he moved to New Orleans, I'd say about 1891, he moved to New Orleans. And shortly thereafter, he started the John Robichaux Orchestra, which predated Buddy Bolden. As a matter of fact, when he started his band, Buddy Bolden was still in school studying music. But John Robichaux started his orchestra that sometime numbered as many as 26 performers in about 1893. So just at the start of the period of time when the idiom of jazz really begins to emerge, we find the predominant orchestra and performing group in the city of New Orleans is the John Robichaux Orchestra. And while Bolden and then King Oliver and later Louis Armstrong were out all over the world promoting the idiom of jazz, it was the John Robichaux Orchestra that entertained, promoted, and continued the idiom of jazz in New Orleans at the beginning of the 20th century. And so what does that have to do with me? Well, in our previous discussions with Brother Mike, we talked about a house when John Robichaux moved to New Orleans in 1891. He built a house at 4727 Camp Street, and he maintained that homestead and lived there all of his life. And across the street from his house, his sister built a house. And his sister's name was Jenny Robichaux Gourrier. So the Gourrier family was exposed to and a witness to the beginnings of jazz. And the record shows that the Robichaux Orchestra was the predominant performing jazz group in New Orleans for at least 30 years into the 20th century. John Robichaux died in 1939. He had a son, John Edward Robichaux, and a nephew, Joe Robichaux. Both were musical performers in New Orleans in the first half of the 20th century. But around 1939, after John Robichaux died, 2 years later, a great nephew of his was born by the name of Mike Gourrier. And 2 years later, in 1943, another nephew, a brother of Mike, was born, and his name was Alfred George Gourrier, and that's me, Al Gourrier. So in our family, we were not performing artists, but we were persons who had great interest and great exposure to the music until the mid-turn of the 20th century, when we both began to become involved in promotion of the music of jazz. First, myself in 1960, when I started the first jazz show on AM radio, black radio in New Orleans. I created a program called The Sounds of Jazz, and it was one of the most significant vehicles for the propagation of our music. And I define jazz as black folks playing black folks music. And I did a jazz show in New Orleans for 30 years until I left in late 1989. Now, Brother Mike, in our earlier shows, had talked about his travels around the United States. And when I started my jazz show on WBOK, he was actually one of the persons that I turned to help me in the structuring of my presentation. And he was very helpful in giving me tips. I pointed earlier in our discussion to some of the significant components that he added to the show. For example, he indicated to me that he had been listening to Sid McCoy, who was called the Dean of Jazz Broadcasters in New York out of WVON in Chicago. And he said that Sid McCoy had a theme song and always used background music. Every time he opened his mic, there was some background music playing. So those were the two prominent suggestions I took from Mike. And I started my Sounds of Jazz show with a theme song called Bonita by Illinois Jacquette. And my background music was a piece by McCoy Tyner. The McCoy Tyner trio is called When Sunny Gets Blue. I used a little different delivery when I started my show. I was very cognizant of the fact that jazz was not a music that had commonly been played on black radio in New Orleans. As a matter of fact, when I started my jazz show, there had never been a jazz show on black radio in New Orleans. And I knew that for a large portion of my audience, I would be introducing a new form of music. My presentation was very unique in that when I started my show, the idiom that I was on was called old black radio. When I started in radio, it was strictly personality radio. It was all about the DJ, the chatter, and all DJs had a name. Papa Stoppa, Hotty Toddy, Mama Lou, Okie Dokie. Everybody had a name. So when I started this jazz show, I said I was going to do something different. So when I played my theme song and I opened my mic for the first time, I said, "Welcome to the Sounds of Jazz with Al Gourrier." So I used my own name. I used a soft melotone voice to deliver my presentation. And I started using songs that listeners could relate to contemporary music. I remember one thing I did just by example, and since I'm talking about in the 60s, I played, there was a jazz guitarist, his name was Boogaloo Joe Jones, and he had a really great rendition of Say It Loud, I'm Black and I'm Proud. So a lot of jazz artists around that period began to take R&B and pop tunes and create them for jazz versions. So I began to use a lot of music of pop tunes that were being played by jazz artists, and then eventually I'd work into a Miles Davis Bitches Brew, which was 20 minutes and could be quite a bit to take, but it was a great experience. Within a few years, I became known as the Dean of Southern Jazz Broadcasters, and in the first 10 years, I had been recognized by international jazz magazines and won numerous awards. So at this time, after this 10-year period, Brother Mike moves back to town. And at this time, I'm on the board of directors of WWOZ, and along with a group of my colleagues on the Jazz Fest board, we put together a group, and I had the pleasure of serving as the first president of this group, and we purchased WWOZ Radio for the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation, which ultimately became the first internet jazz radio station. Is probably now the premier jazz radio station heard all over the world. Well, yours truly, Al Gourrier, was the person who led the effort to acquire that for the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival and served as its first president. So Mike started his show on WWOZ doing jazz and continued that for 25 years. So for the last half of the 20th century, the Gourrier name has been very closely associated with jazz. I've shared with you our family background and involvement in jazz. So we've come to call ourselves the Jazz Brothers. We feel we've made a contribution. So in my last show, we talked, when Mike and I were talking, we were talking about different facets of jazz and particularly about radio. And after the show, I got a call from another jazz brother. And Mike and I have talked extensively about our background, the fact that we had both graduated from St. Augustine High School and from Xavier University. But it wasn't just Mike and I. I did, in fact, mention that we were the number one and number two of 9 children. So there were actually 6 sons that my father, Alfred James, and mother, Edna Ricard, gave birth to. And today I have the pleasure of having a third son who called me and said to me, you stopped your discussion of your evolution at the disco era. And he said, I was a little disappointed because you didn't get to the point where you talked about your other brother who joined you on radio as an announcer on WBOK in New Orleans during the disco era. So this morning, I welcome Brother Maurice Gourrier, who currently lives in Lafayette, Louisiana, who's retired from a distinguished career as a petroleum engineer. But before he got to that point, he was a DJ working with me at WBOK in New Orleans, and I'd like to welcome him to our program this afternoon and say greetings to you, Brother Bo.
Well, thank you, brother. I appreciate it, and I think you pretty much summarized our conversation, because at that moment when I had that thought that I shared with you, I was thinking, well, Mike and Al are for sure the Jazz Brothers, but certainly Al and Mo are the Disco Brothers. And I say that tongue in cheek because I was reminded that you did mention that part of your distinguished career in jazz took you to doing discos, spinning records, playing jazz at clubs, so on and so forth. And the evolution of that brought you and I together to do discos, and we did everything from dances to wedding receptions and everything. But I just need to back up a little bit because you have been very, very eloquent and and quite modest in your explanations. Uh, as Michael helped you with your format and some of the outline of music that you presented on the Sounds of Jazz, a little known fact is that I was trained into radio by Al Gourrier. My brother Al trained me. He showed me the way. But what showing me the way meant was, first of all, he started with the equipment, all of the equipment, what did what, how it was operated, why it was operated, how it plugged in, everything. And some of the first things he taught me was what they called production, where you do commercials and voiceovers and all of that. But in the meantime, I joined him in the studio, watching everything he did doing his shows. And after a while, I was doing the Sounds of Jazz. Al was sleeping on the floor because we were all in college, and I would come in and help him just as he would help me when I trader on weekends. I had a weekend show, and at WBOK, and he would come in and help me, and it was just such a wonderful time. And I'd like to just take a step back. You said 1947. Well, I came in 50. Frank came in what? You were born what? 57, Francis?
Yes, yes.
1957. So.
Or wait, you've got to enter. You can't just say you were
Well,
born.
well, let me finish. Let me finish. I'm sorry.
No, you got to introduce him. Introduce him.
I will. Yes, I'd like to. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce my youngest brother, who my second oldest brother referred to as Francis Valentino. And that is his name because he was born on February the 14th. And the truth is, had he been born on the 13th or the 15th, he'd have been Francis Xavier. But ladies and gentlemen, that's a conversation for another day. Francis is the youngest of 9. Al, my brother, mentioned that our parents had 6 sons, but they also have 3 daughters. The third son is deceased. He's the only one of our siblings who is deceased. My brother Ricardo, who was a Josephite brother in the Josephite Order of Fathers and Brothers, serving the underprivileged and black communities throughout the country, and he was the administrator for the Josephite Order of Fathers and Brothers Drug and Alcohol Program, and made significant impact in this world. He sponsored thousands of people all around the country, and played a significant role in helping people stay clean from drugs and alcohol. That's my brother Ricardo.
God rest his soul.
Yes,
Ricardo's clients, and my while I was able to achieve some recognition for jazz, I think probably the most significant contribution made by anybody in our family was by Brother Ricardo Gourrier. His clients were high-ranking government employees. He worked out of Washington, D.C., and he serviced government employees who had addiction to drugs and alcohol. And he was so successful in his job. He was known all over the United States. He was he was a really heavy set guy, weighed over 400 pounds at some time, but he was a Friar Tuck type, and he traveled all over the United States supporting persons who had this affliction, and I'm just so proud that we're able to at least give him some recognition and credit for the significant contributions that he made to our society in his short life. So I appreciate your calling forth the name of Brother Rick, and I think it's appropriate that we pay tribute and recognition to him today. Thanks for helping me with that.
Yes, and the people who he serviced were either way they were very fortunate, but from their perspective, it was like, I am very fortunate, or it's oh my God, because Brother Rick was a very smart man, but he was very nonsensical. He didn't put up with any stuff. If you were going to do something, you did it, and if you didn't do it, you had to pay the piper when you talked to the brother. And he kept everybody on the straight and narrow with not only his intellect, but his wit and everything else he got from Ed and Alfred, our wonderful parents. But I wanted to mention Brother Rick because he was, like I said, he's our only sibling that is deceased. But he was the brother that was right older than me, just as Michael was the brother that was right older than Al. And we slept in bunk beds. I slept on the top bunk above him all my young life, and he had a significant impact. The only reason I ever got mad with him because he was the guy that broke the news to me that, dude, come on, you're kidding me? There's no Santa Claus. Yeah, my brother Rick did that for me. But anyway, that's a conversation for another day too. But where I left off was we were talking about the 50s, and I briefly introduced Francis because him being the youngest of 9 and the youngest of the 6 sons, we all are products from the beautiful couple Ed and Alfred, and I think about the span of time and all of the iterations, all of the adjustments they had to make as parents, raising 9 children, and we were all 2 years apart. And when it came to me, number 6, my birthday set off the every 2-year celebration of every birthday. And what I meant by that is I was in July, 2 years, my birthday was in July, and
you're the only summer baby.
That's right. That's exactly right. So, but it was our parents who. Let me digress one more time. Al mentioned that Mama passed him up. Our mother passed him up in college. Our mother went to college, and
that was a previous show. So
in a previous show.
You have to give a little more information about that.
Okay, well, in the previous show, Al was talking about the profound effect that our mother had on all of us, and how she encouraged him to stay in school, stay in college, and she raised 9 children, and then she went back and she got her degree before she finished her degree field before he finished his. And I thought about that, and my primary thought was how they impacted us and what they taught us. And basically, what they taught us is that children, it's not all about what I say to you as much as it is what I show you, what you see me do. So, in essence, any of the Gourrier family that went to college and didn't finish at the time, what our mother showed us was, well, she'll never have to say go to college, but beyond that is you have to finish, and you will. Be patient, do whatever it takes. But if she could be married to Alfred and have 9 children and go back and get her degree, anybody on the face of this earth can do it. Took a special person. But we were all well trained, and my mother being a teacher, from my point of view, it really wore off on me. I won every penmanship contest that I entered from 6th all the way through finishing high school. And my penmanship was so extraordinary that even in my professional life, when I wrote notes or, before the laptops and before the fax machines and all of that, when you had to write things down, people were always very, very impressed with my ability for script. And it served me well. And it's all because my mother literally made me dot the I's and cross the T's in a specific way. So that's another small example. But she encouraged me to pursue an opportunity to be on radio like my big brother. And in 1969, Al told me, he said, go down and apply. And when I applied, the station manager wanted to know what I knew. And essentially, they got a person who was fully trained. I was fully accustomed to all of the equipment at the station because my brother trained me. So the only thing I had to do was get over a little stage fright, and for however long that lasted. And then I was on my way in the regular format of the station, which was something other than jazz. But I had my program on the weekends, and I worked with Al as much as I could. He helped me every chance he got. If I was studying or if I was too tired or whatever, he was there to support me and made me help me through. Even the embarrassment of not being able to read the news because of the teletype and how words would be missing and all of that stuff. But we thoroughly enjoyed it. It was a great time, and now that I think about it, it was a historic time because, as Al said, there wasn't any other jazz programs in the city, and it was once said that the greatest form of flattery is imitation, and I think there was a few jazz programs that started up subsequent to the Sounds of Jazz. But the Sounds of Jazz was always the anchor, especially in the Black community on AM radio, which was quite a force back then. But I thoroughly enjoyed it, and the all of that training helped me to be able to work with my brother when he took his show on the road. And what I mean by that is he was invited to do programs at different clubs, and before I knew it, he started buying equipment. We bought equipment, and then we started booking. As I said earlier, we started booking the wedding receptions, parties. I mean, we did so many parties; it was amazing. Any social event, we can do it. We would do it, and we worked every place from a little very, very small auditorium to the Superdome in New Orleans. Yes, that's right. The Al Gourrier Disco actually worked in the Superdome, and it was a fun time.
that was a fun time, and I remember how I actually got started doing that. My first involvement was with a friend of mine who was a DJ on a competitive station. WYLD had a young man by the name of George Vinette, and we were friends. We were part of an organization called NATRA, the National Association of Television and Radio Artists.
That's right.
So we worked together, and we were supportive of one another, even though we were on competitive stations. And George invited me to a record hop he had at a high school in Shrewsbury. And I went out to this record hop, and he had this wooden box someone had built with him. It was like an oversized suitcase, and it had two turntables on it, and he had some speakers. And it was called a record hop. And so he said, "This is something you could do." So I gave it some thought, and after a while, I started putting some equipment together to do a record hop. And from that meager beginning, we did, in fact, grow to the point where we actually had a company. Sometimes it would take as many as 5 guys to bring all of the equipment. Of course, when we performed in the Superdome, it would take a crew. But the most enjoyable times that I had, and with the overwhelming majority of my disco effort was with Mo, was when we did house parties in New Orleans.
Yeah.
If you were a doctor or a lawyer in New Orleans, and this is in the 60s and 70s and 80s, if you were a doctor or a lawyer or some well-to-do person in New Orleans and you were having a party and you didn't have Al Gourrier during the disco, you didn't have a party. And it was a lot of fun. And then from the house parties, I started working in clubs. The first club date I did was in a disco club called the Chat Boutique. And I would go into the club on like a Saturday or Sunday evening, and I'd start about say 6 o'clock, and I'd work for 2 to 4 hours depending on the gig, and then the heavy disco would follow me. But I did about maybe 6 or 7 different clubs in New Orleans where I performed a jazz disco. And Mike was saying when we talked with him last time that was actually about the time that he came to New Orleans, and he actually got into performing jazz by doing discos and clubs in Galveston, Texas. So when he came to New Orleans, that was in the 80s, that was something he had been doing in Galveston, Texas, and for a period of time it was very popular. And of course, nowadays I think everything goes in cycles, and one of the reasons why I personally feel we made a significant contribution because the public performance of jazz, particularly by Black artists, just damn near dried up. Believe it or not, and probably most of our listeners, at least people from New Orleans, may not even realize that we actually had a Playboy Jazz Club in New Orleans, and it closed up. And there has never really been a concerted effort of really promoting our music. And I I don't pretend to suggest or insinuate it was uh, a victim of racism. And as I've indicated, it's my belief that jazz is black folks playing black folks music. And just like every other idiom or invention that we have made, the dominant culture just takes it and does what they want with it. And jazz is not really that easy a piece to duplicate, while certainly some jazz artists of other ethnic persuasion have had some success. But it's my experience being born and raised in the deep South and being a product of the Creole culture in New Orleans. It's my observation that the dominant racist culture, because it was something in essence that was created by and presented to the world by black folks, they didn't want to have anything to do with it. And right now, we're at, I would say, probably a low level as it relates to interest and promotion in jazz. And that's why Michael and I have become involved in the National African American Jazz and Heritage Legacy Museum, which is being built in Oklahoma. A young lady, Rosetta Funches, who was charged by Dr. Ron Myers, who is the person who's credited with organizing Juneteenth organizations, which is our primary funding agency today and are the producers of our program, the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation. Dr. Ron Myers in 1997 brought together all of the existing Juneteenth groups in New Orleans in 1997. And of course, maybe everybody doesn't realize that Juneteenth was June 19th, and it was the day that General Granger and the collaboration of black landed at Galveston, Texas, informed the slaves in Galveston, Texas, that Abraham Lincoln on January 1st, 1861, had issued the Emancipation Proclamation, and they were free. And here it was 4 or 5 years later, and they hadn't had any information about that. So that day, June 19th, became known originally as Jubilee, Celebration Day, and then ultimately emerged as Juneteenth, which is really the only true, pure African American celebration in the United States. And what's so significant about Juneteenth is that last year, 99 senators in the year of COVID, 99 senators agreed to support a holiday for the observation of Juneteenth. However, because of the implications and the way it was structured, in order to pass, it would need 100 senators. Because we have 100 senators in the United States Senate. 99 senators approved it. One did not. I won't even credit by saying his name. But that resolution has again been introduced into Congress. And for those who are listening, who are interested in being supportive, call your representatives in the House of Representatives and ask them to see to it that the bill in the United States Congress recognizing the celebration of Juneteenth be passed this year. So
That was awesome.
I got a little carried away there.
No, I think that's all.
I've been raising my hand, but y'all must not see me raising my hand here.
Do you think you're on video?
No, I'm just
okay.
kidding. I'm just saying.
This is our baby brother, Francis Gourrier.
I thought I might as well step in. I thought I might as well step in before.
Frank.
Yes.
Hold on.
Yes, sir.
Frank called me. I shared with him a copy of the show. The last time I did a show, number 2 of the Jazz Brothers with Mike. During the show, we were talking about the radio period, particularly around payola, and how we had an opportunity to meet some of the artists. And I told the story about how I went into this James Brown's dressing room, and he gave me my first crisp, brand new $100 bill. Well, the next day, after I shared the story with a guy I went to college with, Al Johnson, he called me from Prentice, Mississippi to say, I was with you when that happened. And then that same day later, Francis called me and said, hey, I remember you taking me, and what was your recollection of what happened, Frank? This is my baby brother, Frank. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was listening to the last show with Mike and Al was talking about the old days with the payola and stuff, and how he had gone to the auditorium to a concert, and after the concert was over, he was invited back to the dressing room, and the guy shook his hand, and when he shook his hand, he put a $100 bill in Al's hand, and the whole while I'm sitting listening to the show, I'm sitting there with my wife, and I'm telling my wife exactly what happened, how it happened. I told her who it was, because he didn't tell you who it was when he first started talking about it. He just told the story, and then once he told said about the guy put a $100 bill in his hand, he said it was James Brown, and I was telling my wife all along. I said, I remember that. That was at the Municipal Auditorium. I said I was with Al that night, and the next day I called Al and I said, bro, do you remember that I was with you that night when we went back to his dressing room and he gave you that money? And we had a big conversation. Anyway, we had a big conversation about all of the things that we had done, and in as much as the concerts and the discos and the whole 9 yards. Man, y'all have really blown it up and went so many places. I don't know where to start and where to end. But I'm gonna just try to quickly piece together a little lineage of my own. First thing, today Al was talking about Congo Square. I distinctly remember the Congo Square issue, where on Sundays, my brother that's right above me, Kevin and I would go to Congo Square on Sundays and play the drums, and it would be 40 or 50 people out there. This was in the mid to late 70s, early 80s. Every Sunday they'd be out there. We'd go and we'd beat the drums and we'd talk and it came to me. I want to say it might have been Gil Scott Heron said that everybody understands drum. And believe me, people would come from all around to see the tourists and stuff would just be amazed. They'd be lined up along the fence by Armstrong Park, and they would really enjoy that. And another thing, Al talked about the personalities on the radio and how that was a big part of the job, And I started talking to him about the first time I met Shelley Pope. Shelley Pope was a top DJ back in the early '60s, and I can remember being on the floor in front of that glass door at 505 Aron Street. I had gone with Al to do his show. He used to do the midnight to 6 six o'clock, something like that show. And then Shelley Pope would come in and do the 6 o'clock in the morning show. And the first time I met Shelley Pope, man, it really, I was laying on the floor when he opened the door. And he told Al, he said, "Shelley, darling." And I opened my eyes and I looked up, and he was a kind of big guy, you know. And I was telling Al about how I remembered his hairdo and his makeup and the whole 9 yards, you know. We laughed about that. And then we went on to talk about some of the other personalities at BOK. I told him I distinctly remember one guy, man, because Al and I had often talked about James Brown being one of the original rappers. And after James Brown, I think we both agreed it was a guy named R.J. Jenkins. He was a DJ. He'd come on in the evening like 4:30 drive time. And when he would start his show, he had the trumpets blaring, dun, 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 and he'd go through this promo, and then he said, "His Majesty, the mighty R.J. Jenkins," and then he would
rub-a-dad, that he start rapping.
He would do that Fungus Among Us. He had that Fungus Among Us promo lead that led him into his show. Man, it was truly fascinating. And this I can't put exact year on when that was.
Well, Frank, look, I think I would say that in his heyday was 1969. And another thing, and I'm sorry for interrupting you, but I'm a little older and I got to say things while I'm thinking about them.
I understand.
1969, R.J. Jenkins, there was nobody else who sounded like him. He was what they call rapping today. He was rapping then. He was, and I think of 1969. I think that we could go on a search engine to determine what is the popular, what is most popular thought of as the beginnings of rap. Okay, and I don't know what year that would be, but I can tell you in 1969, R.J. Jenkins was truly rapping. And then I thought, how ironic, you know, New Orleans is the birthplace of jazz. Well, who would ever thought within the realm of possibility that New Orleans would be the birthplace of rap, which has evolved now to hip hop. And I'm sure that there's other people with other ideas that would tend to disagree with us. But in 1969, people were excited because of everything that you said that he used as a prerequisite when he first came on his show. And he also did recordings, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Frank? He actually did a couple of records.
I remember one of them was Fungus Among Us, man. And he would
Fungus Among Us. It was a hit.
He would go off, man. He would go off. I'm telling you. But I said that to say, you know, I was just touching in on some of the conversation Al and I had after that last show. You know, we were talking about different things, and it really brought a lot of things to memory for me, you know, because we Al and I had a special relationship. My mother knew what she was doing because my mother made Al my godfather when I was born.
Always.
Oh, be careful who you choose for your godfather.
Well, you don't have. I didn't have a choice in that, but my mom did a good job, and I spent a lot of time with Al. Coming up, I
remember
my grandmother used to take care of me when my mother. I was the youngest of 9 children, and I want to say I was 3 or 4 years old when my grandmother died. I think my grandmother died December 23rd, 1960 or 1961. I'm not sure which one it was.
61.
That's pretty good. That's right.
Okay.
1961.
Well, anyway. When my grandmother died, it posed an issue for my mother, who was a school teacher, and like I said, my grandmother kept me in the daytime while my mother and father went to work. All my siblings were out to school and work and whatever they were doing. So my grandmother took care of me. Well, in my grandmother's passing, and like I said, it was I remember it was like the day before Christmas Eve, and I was by. They sent me away from the house. I can remember. It's amazing what you can remember, and I think about that now too. How far back my memory goes. I can remember I was by Mr. Kassim's house when Mr. Kassim lived back in the cut, and Mr. Kassim was the one who told me that grandmother had died, and then he took me. He I guess he wanted to prep me for what was going on at the house, And then he brought me to the house, and everybody was over at the house, and a lot of wailing and crying, and it was a big deal, man, when grandmother passed. But anyway, like I said, it posed a significant problem for my mother because she worked, and I guess she didn't know what to do with me, so he gave me to my godfather, and what we used to like to say all the time is that, yeah, Frank went to college before he went to kindergarten. And that's true. Because every day, Al brought me to Xavier University with him to school. And when Al would go to class, Al would leave me in the university center with somebody, be sitting on some girl's lap or something, playing bid whist. By the time I was 5 or 6 years old, I could probably play bid whist better than some adults. And still today, I'm pretty good at the game. But that's just one of the many things. Al was a great role model, a great mentor.
For sure.
I had a lot of firsts with Al. Like I said, I went to college before I went to kindergarten.
As did I. That's right.
He taught me how to swim. I'll never forget that. He had an apartment up in St. Peter Clear Apartments up on Taladana and Derby. And he walked me to the pool and he said, jump in. And I looked at him. I was like, oh, no, bro. He said, you want to learn how to swim, huh? I said, yeah. He said, well, jump in. I said, no, I don't know how to swim. And then he took me and he just threw me in the pool. And when I came up, he said, now swim. And I was like, going up and drinking the water. Next thing, that natural thing kick in when you start dog paddling. And it was all over after that.
Frank, you said something. You said something and fostered another thought from me, and that is when our grandmother passed away, I was about 11, so I remember quite a bit of it. And you said it right. It was a profound time, and it was so profound that the effects on Mama was so great. My mother grieved so strongly. In my adult life, I'd go by to have coffee with her. My son and I would go to cut her grass or something, and we'd sit down, and she would, around Christmas time, she would grieve. And one day I looked at her and I said, Ma, is this what I have to look forward to? I mean, oh my God, it didn't dawn on me until we had that talk that her mother was everything. She didn't have any sisters or brothers. She had first cousins that she was close to. She was an only child and lost her father when she was 7 or 8. So her mother was everything to her, and she was everything to us too. And I got to say that during that time that Frank was talking about Al taking him to Xavier and everything, Michael was first, Al was number 2, but May Carroll was number 3, and Anne Marie was number 4. And they took care a lot. They played a significant role too in putting the little ones in the stationary tub, and giving them baths and all of those things too. We talk a lot about the impact the Gourrier boys have had, but the truth is we have 3 sisters who have made their marks in different ways in life too, and I couldn't go on without at least giving them their due as children from Edna and Alfred, and who got the same training, the whole 9 yards. But the whole idea of where we are now can be can only be attributed to the strong parents who had very, very strong Christian ideals that was given to them, and
So
this goes up our lineage.
I hope my wife listens to this program. She tells me constantly about how long-winded I am, and I guess after she listens to this program, she'll say, "Oh well, I guess it runs in the family." But
yeah, but every time I get a roll going, Mo comes up with another one, you know. But anyway, let me jump right back in here.
I want to say something about our sister. I want to kind of get us back on track. This is the Jazz Brothers, Part 3. I'm Al Gourrier. This is CROSSROADS, sponsored by the Samuel L. Smith Educational Foundation and the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation of Nevada. And today I'm talking with two of the brothers of the Jazz Brothers, Maurice and Francis Gourrier, and they're reminding me that we have 3 sisters, and that one of our sisters is named French, May French. And the name French in New Orleans is very prominent and significant, and there was a point in her life that she was married to Bob French. And Bob French and his father had played a significant role in the, particularly in the Dixieland Jazz Band period in the mid-20th century in New Orleans. So I hope.
And Bob is deceased.
I was gonna bring that in, but I'm glad you brought it in now, and I think about a lot of those guys too, you know, like what was Freddie
Trombone?
Oh man, yeah,
Freddie Lonzo.
Trombone.
Freddie Lonzo.
Yeah,
yes.
I often think about him. I see he's a world traveler. But anyway, back. I was just trying to get in some of the things that I wanted to say, because I sat patiently waiting, listening to you all, and y'all brought up so many things, you know, about the Congo Square and OBOK, man. I can remember those nights. I spent many nights with Al in that studio, and I had to spun those records and learn how to play the commercials and all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And it was a great time. And in the disco era, I became the engineer, just like you, Mo. Y'all passed that to me. And that job as the engineer entailed hauling all that equipment, setting everything up, setting up the mixing board, right. and then Al would just show up and do the show. And Al, you were talking about another thing you were talking about. Yeah. Another thing Al was talking about those parties. And a lot of those parties, I was with Al at. And he's right about that, Paul. We had some slam bam, and one in particular, it was a doctor. I don't remember who the doctor was, but he lived on Lake Willow in New Orleans East. And it was an after party, the night that Muhammad Ali and Leon Spinks fought. And this guy had the after party, and Al was the DJ. Man, we rocked that place till the sun came up.
Well, you know, the thing about that one, Frank, it was a who's who in the black community.
Yeah,
it was a who's who in the black community.
But that was just one of
that was a good
one. I remember another one that was really Al used to do every year. I don't know if it was a club or it was just some party that they gave around Mardi Gras time every year. It was the Kings over there on St. Anthony Avenue. And boy, we turned that joint out every year. That was another place. But that's just a few things I recalled, you know, when Al was talking about the disco era and all of that stuff. And then back to what I was saying about Al being a great role model and mentor, you know. I did a lot of things with Al. We went a lot of places. I had a lot of firsts with Al. You know, Al took me to my first Super Bowl. Like I was saying, he taught me how to swim. He took me to my first Super Bowl. He and I went. We had this discussion last week too. He and I went to see the first Super Bowl that was played in Tulane Stadium. It was the Kansas City Chiefs and the Minnesota Vikings. I'll never forget that as long as I live. And I mentioned to him last week, we sat like on the 30 or the 40-yard line in that lower, which would be the plaza level of the dome, but in old Tulane Stadium. And I also brought up another instance where I went with Al. We went to this might have been one of the first Bayou Classics. And I was telling him I remember it so distinctly, man, because it was bitter cold. And I even told him I remember what I had on. I used to have a houndstooth trench coat with a lining in it. And I told him I remember I had that on. I remember it was Al, Ernie Singleton, and myself that went to that game, man. And when I tell you it was freezing cold. And that was another thing that we talked about. Then we talked about the days of the LIALO when Al and Champ Clark and Dr. Nephew would do the football games at a very young age.
Do the remote.
I was right there in the press box. I was right in the press box with them.
That's right.
And I had the best eyes out of all of them, so they made me the spy.
Yes.
And
Frank,
I had a board in front of me with all of the numbers on it and who it was, and I'd tell them who it was, who made the tackle or made the play. And
okay, you all are really
wait a minute, Al. I have one question for Frank. Frank, here's the question. When you and Al talked last week, and he mentioned about the recognition of his sisters, did y'all happen to talk about which one of our sisters never missed a jazz funeral? Think about that.
No, we didn't talk about that either. But we talked about a lot of things, and then Al brought up. We talked about the Soul Bowls, which were a big thing in the 70s, and Al brought up today about the natural convention. Man, I'll never forget that as long as I live. I don't know if Al, you were the chairman of the host committee or what you were.
We had the Jackson 5.
Yes, Jackson 5, War.
The Jackson 5. We went to Jackson 5's dressing room. It was really a thrill.
I never got a chance to ask you all how you felt about your brother bringing the Jackson 5 to perform in New Orleans and taking him to meet them.
There you go. There you go.
That was big, man. That was big because this was like in the early. That might have been 1972. So they were just peaking, man. And
they were just
I remember we had a big banquet. And they did the lunch show after the luncheon. They had a big luncheon, and after the luncheon, the Jackson 5 performed. And then that evening after the dinner, it was War. I'll never forget that. And man, they had so many artists that performed there. And it was a raging good time, man. It was big though. It was big, man. Everybody who was anybody in the music industry was there, whether they performed or not. I remember all the T-shirts, man. I had all kind of T-shirts, and they were giving away 45 records and all kind of. I remember those T-shirts, man. I had the Motown one. I'll never forget. I wore that thing for about 10 years.
Well, I didn't talk a lot about the promotion aspect of my career. I actually started producing and promoting shows when I was in college. One of my first two acts I had on a rotating basis who would come to Xavier University when I was in college and perform for me were Hank Crawford and Gene Chandler.
Hold up, Al. Hold up 1 minute. I just had another one. I thought when you said that earlier, I wanted to interject. I remember you did one. It was the same day as Mom and Daddy's. I want to say it might have been the 40th wedding anniversary or something. We had all gone out to dinner somewhere. I don't remember where we went to the restaurant that we went to. But when we finished up with the anniversary thing, you, Beverly, and I went to Xavier University in the Bone. It was the Dells. Another one. I'll never forget that one. Long as I live. Do you remember that?
Yes. And
it was. I think I think it was Mama and them's 30th or their 40th wedding anniversary. April,
Well,
April the 4th or something like that.
I was present at that one also.
Yeah,
well, did either of you come to my jazz concert that I produced in the Municipal Auditorium with Cannonball Adderley?
Absolutely.
Okay, so
I remember Rajon Roll. I remember one with Rajon Roland.
Yes, Rajon Roland Kirk. I love that.
I remember
guy.
that. Yeah. Cannonball Adderley. I remember all of that, bro.
I need to just tell you about one experience I had, and all of these artists that performed for me, and I've talked in a previous show about Success Unlimited, which was a group that I was a part of that produced shows in New Orleans. But one night I had this act that I got to do a show for me in Prout's Alhambra Lounge on Claiborne Avenue.
Yes, sir.
And I went into the dressing room, and I said to the young lady, "I'd like you to sing this song for me." And she said, "Oh, that damn country and western tune. I don't even know the words to the song." I said, "Well, baby, it's already on the jukebox. I'm playing it 2 times an hour on my show." She said, "Okay, well, if you go out and write the words down off the jukebox, I'll sing it for you." So I said, "Okay." So I sat down, I wrote the words for the tune, and the lady sang the tune. About 20 years later, I'm in Las Vegas, Nevada, and I hear this lady is performing in the Grand Ballroom at the Hilton Hotel, in the Elvis Presley Ballroom. So I make arrangements to go to the show, and before I go to the show, I type out a little letter telling her about the time she came to New Orleans to gig for me. And I asked her to sing this song, and she told me she didn't know the words, so I wrote the words down and she sang it for me. So, I mean, by the time I'm in Vegas, I'm really out the business. So when I say I went to her dressing room, and they said, "No, you can't come in. We don't know you." So I said, "Okay, would you give her this letter?" And I gave her the letter, and in the letter, I explained the story as I just shared with you. When she came out on the stage that in Las Vegas in the Elvis Presley Theater, she said, "I'm dedicating this song to a special person in the audience. You know who you are." And she sang, "I'd rather go blind than to see you walk away from me."
Etta James. Etta James.
That's awesome.
She was a good.
Al, there was very few promotions. There's very few promotions that you did that we weren't a part of. Very few. And
that's true.
You know, you brought up a lot of things and things that I haven't thought about in so long. But
I don't feel bad about that, because in our last show, when I was talking with my brother Michael, he's talking about how he comes to New Orleans and he starts to work on WWOZ, and he's there for 25 years, and what a great station it was, and it was the first internet radio station, blah, blah, blah. And I said, "Do you know who the first president was?" And then he named some white boy. And I said, "No, I need to tell you the other story. I need
the
to
real
tell you
story."
the story. And he did not know. He honestly did not know that I had been the first president of WWOZ Radio.
Well, he had been gone.
Right, he wasn't here when that happened. I'm just saying, hey, listen to this, okay? And everybody who's listening, I'm telling my story. We cannot expect any individual, organization, or institution to do for us what we have to do for ourselves. And you have to tell your story. Okay?
That's right. That's exactly right.
Thank you.
Hey,
That's
and
what's up.
let me ease this in while we're talking about our story, because we have one link that goes through all of our stories, and you were talking about it earlier, when we all went to high school, St. Augustine, and I just want to plug them because you brought that up last week as well as this week. Tonight, the St. Augustine Marching 100 will be highlighted on 60 Minutes tonight. So if you have a chance, check that out.
Well,
wait a
Al,
minute.
wait, that's tonight.
Wait.
Last night.
Wait a minute. That's at 6:00. Okay.
Correct.
At
Correct.
7:00, the Grammys come on tonight,
That's
and
correct.
there are 4 St.
Purple
Augustine
Night.
High School graduates
Purple
who
Night.
are
That's right.
4
That's correct.
St. Augustine graduates who have been nominated for Grammys
For
in
Grammy Awards.
2020.
That's right. P.J.
Well,
Martin.
wait a minute. That's tonight, and I'd like to talk about last night. St. Augustine High School basketball team won the Division I state championship.
That's correct. That's correct.
At the Coliseum in Lake Charles, and just an extraordinary feat because they had tough competition throughout the whole tournament, and they did it. And congratulations to all of the
Yeah, they be the big rival, Scotlandville. That's right.
Yes, that's right. And
So,
congratulations to
but
them.
I just wanted to put that plug in. I just wanted to put that plug in for tonight. And like Al said, after 60 Minutes, the Grammys will be following 60 Minutes on CBS. So you just set your dial and check it out to your CBS affiliate and check out the Marching 100, and then you'll be able to check out the rest of the Purple Knights who will be. Hopefully they'll bring home some Grammys tonight.
Al, did he say Marching 100?
We've talked about St. Yes, I was in the Marching 100, and we've talked about St. Aug every show that I've done in the Jazz Brothers series, and I'm going to send a copy of the series to St. Augustine High School to put in their archives, because we're just a blurb in what has probably been one of the most significant organizations that ever was established to build the positive self-image of Black men in New Orleans, Louisiana. And that was St. Augustine High School.
Well, throughout the country now.
Well,
And,
St. Augustine graduates are leaders of the world today. And look, we're talking about 4 of the St. Aug graduates on the Grammys tonight. 2 of the St. Augustine graduates were in the Super Bowl this year.
That's right.
Leonard Fournette and Tyrann Matthews are both graduates of our high school, St. Augustine High School.
That's right. That's right. They were both each represented their respective team. But Al, you wasn't the only one of the brothers who was in the Marching 100, and all this talk about jazz and everything. I consider myself to be the only one of the brothers and sisters who is a musician.
Musically inclined.
And well, you can put it that way. Our mother sent me to music lessons, and I played the clarinet. And when I left Corpus Christi Elementary School, which was a Catholic school, I went to St. Augustine, and my freshman year, my mother had sent me during the summers to tennis lessons, and I had the great Nehemiah Atkinson as my tennis coach, and he was a world-renowned tennis player who one of his last stints was coach of the Xavier University tennis team, and I had the honor of being one of his proteges. So when I went to St. Aug my freshman year, I played on the tennis team, but it wasn't until after my freshman year that
our mother did the same thing for me. she sent me, when I finished from Corpus Christi, she sent me to study music with Edwin Harold Hampton. He taught me how to play the clarinet, and he was the founder and organizer of the Marching 100 band of St. Augustine High School, and he was my teacher.
And well, when I was there at St. Aug, we were at St. Augustine. Mr. Hampton, who also trained me as a young kid before high school, uh, he orchestrated these halftime shows based on 8 to 5 progression, and what that meant was 8 steps to 5 yards. And essentially, what happened was this thing went around the country, basically amongst the historical black colleges and universities, and any college nowadays that is refers to themselves as the Marching 100 got that from St. Aug, and from St. Aug during the 60s and during the 70s. Yeah, he had a profound effect on not only St. Augustine but on a lot of the black colleges who have big bands, where St. Augustine was pretty much the forum club for them. Where we sent musicians to all kinds of colleges, mostly HBCUs, and I think the only college left that's called the Marching 100, I think, may be Florida A&M. I might be wrong about that, but for those of you who are listening who know anything about the history of the band in Tallahassee, your name came from Edward Harrell Hampton, who my brother Al was talking about, who was our band director, and certainly.
But not only,
but he was also related to Lionel Hampton, who came to New Orleans for different things. But whenever he came, he brought the vibes. He brought his band to St. Augustine High, and he'd set up in the cafeteria and play for the whole school. And it was exciting. It was very, very exciting to have a person like that who ate, slept, and drank music all day, all night, and
and he was a great
profound impact on young black men.
Yeah,
he was a great person.
But Ed Hampton not only taught y'all guys how to march, bro, but he made y'all learn how to read music. And let me tell you something. There is a plethora of musicians across this country and across the world.
Oh yeah.
That because of Edwin H. Hampton, bro, they have had a career. And I mean, they got some humdingers out there, man. Just a couple off the top of my head. I can think of one of my classmates, Michael Stewart, Patches. He goes by Patches. He's a trumpet player. World renowned. Sugarfoot, Jonathan Moffett, the drummer for the Jackson 5 for 30 or 40 years, and
his older brother Orrin, who is now deceased, Orrin Moffett. He played clarinet and marched next to me for 3 years at St. Augustine. Correct.
He was a whale of a drummer. Jonathan was a whale of a drummer.
Yeah. Sugarfoot. He played for the Jacksons.
Mm-hmm.
Still does. Yeah.
So guys,
St. Aug boys. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm involved in an effort to address the legacy of jazz. As I indicated earlier, Mike and I are both on the planning and organizing committee for the National African American Jazz and Heritage Legacy Museum. And one of the concerns that I have is the exposure of the music today. I talked earlier about how things go in cycles, and I know that during the latter part of the 20th century, Mike and I were very instrumental in lifting the exposure of jazz and a level of consciousness on the part of the community. And I just don't see a lot of that going on today. What's your experience?
Let me just say this to you, Al. When you left, you took a lot of it with you, because a lot of the things that you were fighting for, I can remember the days of a lot of. We did a lot of stuff, man, and talked about a lot of things, and you did a lot of moving and shaking, trying to propagate the jazz scene in New Orleans and keep it going. And just to give the audience an idea of what we're talking about right now, the original New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Foundation and the Jazz Fest that they put on was originally to do that, just what you talking about doing right now. But that has also been hijacked from us. And like you said, if we don't do it, ain't nobody can do it better than you. You know, for what you want to do, or what you want to learn, or what you want to propagate, you have to do it. You have to tell your story. You have to put it out there like it is, and let it be known. Because the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival is not the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival no more. You know, it's a bluegrass festival, really, truly. You know, because we still have a jazz tent, but it's not the significance I think that it should hold in the whole realm of things. You know, as far as that goes, you know, they'd have made a sideshow out the jazz issue of the jazz festival. You know, but the name is what draws people. But when you come, you know, it's everything but, you know, the full force of propagating the jazz,
That's right.
Right, the jazz.
Our music.
That's right. That's correct. But that's because we let somebody else tell our story.
But Al, I think that we might have to accept that. And you didn't fully get to ask the whole question, but if I can understand where you were going with the first part of that question, it may be that we might have to accept that we don't know the answer of how this is propagated. We don't know what it'll take. It takes time, money, and exposure. It takes a Juneteenth celebration on a Sunday afternoon where a family shares its rich ties to jazz and the promotion of jazz and all of that. We just don't know what the answer is, and it's chilling to think that this art form could and perhaps may even be getting away from us. Even though, like Frank says, we have the Jazz Fest at Ventura, there's Jazz Fest all over the country, but like Frank says, a lot of them do the marketing and call it jazz to take care of other agendas. And I may not be right about that, but part of what I'm saying, I think, you know, your art is true. But we might not have the answer, except that we keep doing these little things, just like Frank said, just like you and Mike get on talking about your experiences and teaching people, the people who have never heard these things before, about the history of jazz, the nature of jazz, and how you don't have to be a musician to appreciate and promote jazz. And
Right.
I think that's part of the answer to your question, because it's a fearful type question. You know, it's kind of ludicrous to think that we could lose an art form as beautiful and as great as it is, but truly well within the realm of possibility. When we talk about the way the technology is today, the trends going today, it's not going to jazz. I promise you that.
Yeah. What you don't use, you lose, and that was one of the factors that attracted me to become involved and supportive of the National African American Jazz and Heritage Legacy Museum effort. They've got a dynamic spokesman, Rosetta Funches, who says we've got to find ways of putting jazz in schools. And she's got the right idea. I mean,
Correct.
just like I'm going to do a very crude example. Just like racism is taught, we aren't people aren't born racist. It's something they learn. Well, we've got to use that same philosophy to begin to promote and expose young children and young generations to our music and our culture. Our music, you're right, as far as it relates to being an art form, is one of the most significant components of our contributions as African Americans to this country and to the world.
Period.
And
that's correct.
You know, our discussion today has just borne out the fact that we may be giving it away, but losing it by any.
But Al, they have to want it. They have to want it, and it's an uphill battle. Yeah, Al, don't you think it's an oxymoron in a way? And I'm not trying to be derogatory or anything else, but it's like the worst name in basketball sports, the Utah Jazz. It's like an oxymoron. It's like, what? The Utah Jazz. How can you have the center of the earth jazz in Oklahoma City? And we know the reason why. And it's the point I'm trying to make. You can't dollar. You can spoon feed them. You can do whatever you want, but if they don't want it, they don't want it. And that's what everything points to. There's too much other stuff out there. But I think that's easier.
I think if you expose them to it, bro, it's just like everything else. You got to expose those children to a wide variety of things.
Of course.
And you don't know what their thing is until they're exposed to it and they find it themselves. And I believe the lady is right when she says that it's an art form that should be taught in schools, bro. It's that important.
But that's part of the uphill battle I'm talking about.
Well, brother,
everything's a battle, bro. Everything's an uphill battle for us. I mean, everything we've ever done in life has been uphill,
You're right.
We weren't given no silver spoons.
Then it's up to us to choose our battle.
I'm going to wrap it up with a line.
Well, thank you, brother.
From the Silence of the Lamb. We covet what we see and hear. So our conversation about finding ways of introducing new and younger generations to our music and finding ways of exposing our music is of paramount importance for us. And we also have to cover time, and our time is just about up for today's presentation. So
thank you for having us.
If you all have a quick comment you'd like to make to close out our show, I'd like to give you that opportunity.
Okay. I just like to go back to the idea of promoting the jazz, because we have a lot of young musicians and stuff who are, like the Marcellus boys and stuff like that, and those guys, a lot of those NOCA guys that still try to promote it, but it still needs to be on the grander scale, and there's definitely something that we can't let go, because if we let it go, I mean, they tried to change the whole order of things, as far as jazz is concerned, until some of the people started to speak up. But I'm saying that to say, I was thinking about Al's show. And a lot of those people who religiously tuned in every night to his show, who thoroughly enjoyed that. I mean, even as a grown man, for me in my 50s and 60s, I go out. The people would hear my name, and the first thing they say, Al Gourrier. I say, yeah, that's my brother. He said, man, I used to listen, but those people or should I say, how should I put this? They're coming to the age now where they won't no longer be with us. So we definitely have to brand a whole nother generation to keep the thing alive, bro. Because where we at right now is definitely a critical situation, I think.
Well, I think you made a really good point, and you called probably the first family of jazz name in New Orleans, and of course that's the Marcelluses. Of course, we have the Baptiste. We have a few jazz families, but if you think about it, Ellis Marcellus, Wynton and Theophile both say that the great jazz musician that their father was, he was not the most influential as it related to their music career was. Their mother, Mrs. Marcellus, was a music teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And she's the one who started her kids in music classes. And of course, the father was a premier performing artist. And so the point I want to make here is that we have got to get this missing link of this missing generation of people who have had virtually limited or no experience to jazz. We've got to find a way of exposing jazz to them so that they in turn can generate some interest in their children in a better understanding, appreciation, and promotion of our music.
Well,
Mo?
I think it starts with forums like you've created here, through your association with Juneteenth, and that's what it's going to take. The baby steps, and I say baby steps. It could be that this avenue that we're looking for is there, but I agree with Frank. If they expose, they can't help but like it, But it's little things like we're doing here today that'll help push the effort forward. The only thing I have left to say is thank you, brother. I love y'all. I appreciate all the things that you've done, Al, as a mentor, but as a leader in your family, as a leader in our family. All the things that you've helped us with through, and I'll leave you with this last little story, and I'm telling this story to Frank. Frank, we were at a gig one time, and this was in the early 70s, and we had gone down to the Desire Project, and this was during the revolution, if you will. I mean, there was a lot going on. Anyway, this guy pulls me on the side, and he said, "Hey, Gourrier." I said, "Yes, sir." He said, "You Ken Al Gourrier?" He says, "That's your daddy?" And I said, "Yeah, he's my dad." I said, "That's my dad." And I chuckled and I said, "Yeah, Al's my dad." Well, here we are in the 2000s, and I was in my brother's company, and he introduced me to somebody, and he said, "Oh, this is my big brother Mo." And I couldn't help but think, what goes around comes around. Yeah. But all in good humor. I thank you guys for the opportunity to be part of this, and there may be some other ideas that we could come up with and talk about going forward. But for now, I'll just say thanks, and I'll turn it over to you.
And I'd just like to say thank you also. I appreciate the opportunity to chat about a good subject, and so I say good subjects, and I just want to say I want to say one more piece before I go. It slipped my mind earlier, and it almost slipped my mind again. I want to spit this at you before I go. Another first for you, Al. I don't know if you remember this or not. I tried out for the school basketball team, and I made the basketball team. And I remember I went to my mother, and I asked my mother if she would buy me a pair of tennis. And She said, tennis? I said, yeah. All Stars. Chuck Taylor, Converse, All Stars. She said, I said it costs $9.31 at Maison Blanche or Holmes. You know what my mama told me? They got people paying $200, $300 for children's tennis today. When I asked my mother to buy me that pair of tennis, she told me, this is her words to me. She said, $9.31 for tennis. You must be out your mind. and I say that for two reasons. One, like I was saying before, people paying $200-$300 for tennis shoes today. But I just want to say, my brother
they
Al.
They must be on sale.
My brother Al took me to Sport Coat, which at the time was around there on Broad Street. And he bought me my first pair high top Chuck Taylor All Stars and some red shoestrings to go with it. I thank you for that, brother. Thank you for the opportunity to hang out today and talk. Blessings to all, and check out the Big Purple tonight.
Yeah,
thank
for
you
sure.
very much.
Well, I did invite Brother Kevin, who's somehow, despite his age, is still working while all the rest of us are retired. I guess that's why we could get together and converse today. But I'd like to extend greetings to our sister Anne Marie, who was referred to but not named as the person who attended every second line.
I knew somebody was going to get to it. Also, before you go, tell them Shrewsbury was just to the west of New Orleans by the railroad tracks. And let them know that Toledano was like in Midtown.
So also, I'm sure our baby sister Santa will eventually hear the show, and I'm sure she'll enjoy it. And I want to thank you for both of you for joining me today. I had invited cousin Judy. I had hoped we'd have an opportunity to talk about her father, who was part of our family, but we'll do that at another time. But this is about all the time we have today. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Samuel L. Smith Educational Foundation and the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation of Nevada for sponsoring our program. I'd like to say a specific thank you to Ms. Dee Evans, the Director of Communication for the National Juneteenth Observance Foundation, for her help in producing the show and being our recording engineer for today. And that wraps up today's session of Crossroads. And I'm your host, saying thank you for joining me today. I'm Al Gourrier. Have a pleasant day.